Putin says accusing Syrian government of using chemical weapons is nonsense, and the US has to submit evidence to the United Nations Security Council. Arab and international condemnation of the United States threat to launch aggression against Syria continue in various world cities. And Syrian Arab army units continue to clear various areas of terrorist groups. Good afternoon, this is News in English from the Syrian Arab television in Damascus. Russian President Vladimir Putin affirmed that the Syrian government did not use chemical weapons, referring that accusing the Syrian Arab army of using such weapons is nonsense. In a statement, Putin said that holding the Syrian government responsible for using chemical weapons constitutes a provocative act, considering that calls to strike Syria are motivated by recent advances achieved by the Syrian Arab army. Putin called on the United States Barack Obama not to forget that he was a winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace, stressing that the US has to submit evidence on the use of chemical weapons to the United Nations Security Council. In a related context, an official source at the Ministry of Foreign and Expatriates Affairs said that after days of media exaggeration about what the US administration described as decisive evidence, the United States Secretary of State John Kerry only produced materials based on old stories which were published by terrorists over a week ago and are full of fabrications and lies. The source said that Foreign and Expatriates Ministry confirms that all accusations leveled by Kerry against the Syrian government and the Syrian state are lies and baseless for the following reasons. 1. Syria has challenged the United States to produce one piece of true or logical evidence that it used alleged chemical weapons, and Kerry relied on fabricated images from the internet, and the alleged call made by a Syrian officer after the alleged attack is too ridiculous to be discussed. Second, Syria never impeded or restricted the International Investigation Committee. On the contrary, as the United Nations Secretary General has lauded the Syrian cooperation with the committee in his most recent call with the Foreign and Expatriates Minister on the 30th of August 2013. Asserting that Syria permitted the committee to move exactly as per the agreement signed by the two sides. Third, the United Nations itself said time and again that the traces of using any form of toxic gas do not dissipate over time, and the proof of this is that the UN sent the investigation committee 5 months after the Syrian government requested an investigation of Khan al-Assad incident. Therefore, the Syrian government did not delay the investigation committee's access to the alleged attack sites, as this occurred within 48 hours of arrival of UN envoy Angela Kane to Damascus. Russia affirmed that the United States' threats to use force against Syria are unacceptable, referring that any military operation would undermine the prospects of political solution of the crisis. A spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Alexander Lukashevich, said that Washington's statements to use force against Syria are unacceptable, pointing out that the US should implement the decision of the G8 summit and the agreements that followed. He added that even the United States allies are calling on it to wait until the end of the United Nations mission, stressing that any military action would be a blatant violation of international law and would undermine the role of the United Nations Security Council. Head of the National Security and Foreign Policy Committee at the Iranian Shura Council, Alauddin Projordi, reiterated his country's firm and principled stand in defending Syria, the axis of resistance in the region. In a pre-departure statement he made in Tehran before heading to Syria and Lebanon, Projordi stressed that the United States and its tools in the region failed in their war against Syria, stressing that any US military action against Syria would inflame the whole region. He added that the media fanfare about the possibility of launching an aggression against Syria is a psychological war that indicates the weakness of the United States, stressing the country's unwavering stand in support of Syria. in confrontation of any aggression. The permanent Iranian representative at the United Nations, Mohammad Khuzai, stressed that his country severely rejects any Western aggression against Syria, demanding the UN member states to give the United Nations inspectors enough time to complete their investigations. Khuzai denounced the United States and French sending of their warships to the Mediterranean to launch an attack against Syria. He added that Iran rejects any military operation against Syria because it undermines the possibility of reaching a political settlement for the crisis in Syria. Former US President Jimmy Carter warned the United States of any unilateral action against Syria, considering it as a mistake that would lead to catastrophic consequences. The Carter Center, the institute headed by President Carter, said in a statement that a punitive military response without a United Nations Security Council mandate or broad support from NATO would be illegal under international law and unlikely to alter the course of the war. The statement also described the use of chemical weapons in Syria as a grave breach of international law. People have taken to the streets in various world capitals expressing rejection of any military strike against Syria and calling upon the United States to abide by the international law and the United Nations Charter. More about that in the following. Condemnations have continued by world's capital of the American and Western threats of a possible strike against Syria. Union of the Southern American States has criticized the foreign intervention in Syria out of the United Nations Charter, underlying the necessity of a peaceful solution to the Syrian crisis. Nicaragua, the biggest country in Central Africa, criticized the threats made by the United States of launching a strike against Syria. For his part, the Czech Prime Minister asserted that attacking Syria has no legal basis whatsoever, reaffirming his country's stance that calls for reaching a peaceful solution for the crisis in Syria and not to resort to force. In a statement released, communist and labor parties called peoples of the world and the labor class to combat and denounce the new imperial war against Syria. In Australia, hundreds took to the streets to condemn any possible aggression on Syria following the statements of the American President Obama, who said that he was considering a limited strike against Syria. The demonstrators who gathered downtown the capital Sydney raised banners that said "Hands off Syria," while others raised photos of the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and voiced solidarity with the Syrians and support of the Syrian Arab Army against any possible attack, asserting that they will be the voice of the Syrian people to tell Obama that he has taken a decision on behalf of the Syrian people, the people of the United States, the peoples of the whole world, and that he is violating the international law and the UN's Charter. For its part, the Syrian community took to the street together with Italians and with the participation of Archbishop Hilario Cappucci to voice solidarity and support to Syria against the American and Western threats of any attack against Syria. Moving to field developments, the Syrian security forces arrested terrorist groups member, including the most dangerous wanted men who committed acts of terrorism against civilians and scientific cadres in Ruknuddin and Masakin Barzi in Damascus, as the security forces seized their weapons and explosive belts. Also in the city, the Syrian Arab Army units destroyed the weapons and ammunition belonging to an armed terrorist group in a qualitative operation the army carried out against dens in Dar al-Balad and on the road leading between Al-Ghariya al-Sharqiyya and Khirbat Ghazali in Daraa countryside, which led to the killing of a number of terrorists, including Haytham Salim al-Sarhan. With this, we reach the end of our news for today. For more details, you can visit our website in English, www.syriaonline.sy. Now over to our economic news, but after the break.